Thank you for doing this. This is an honor for
Well,
me, so it's great to hear your stories. All right, so tell me when. All right, so the first part, let me introduce myself again, just for the camera. My name is Ron Bohan. I'm a volunteer here and doing a series of interviews. So I really appreciate your time today. Would you prefer to be called Lieutenant Colonel or Mr. Shepard or?
Tommy,
Tommy Shepard. Okay, thank you so much. Call me Ron, please.
thank you.
Today is November 8th, 2014, and in the room we have Lieutenant Colonel Tommy Shepard, we have Mitch Bohan, who's observing, and Sherry Kilmurray. So thank you for your time. So we're really here today just to have a conversation and pick your brains about your recollections and feelings about an important part of our history, especially World War II. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of set the stage for us. How did you first join the Army Air Corps, and how did that come about? Specifically, were you drafted or did you volunteer?
No, I volunteered on the second day of January of 1941 from Memphis, where I was born and raised, and several of my closest of friends had preceded me, and I was just almost 18, a month away. I was the baby in that sense.
And the baby, is this in reference to your siblings?
Of my high school friends.
Oh, okay.
At Memphis Tech High School, some 340 pupils.
Yeah. So, Tommy, let me ask you, how did your parents and your other friends and family feel about you volunteering for the service?
They were not pleased, but mother and father agreed, and I was the fourth child of their union. And so they allowed me to go on in. And I went in the Army Air Corps, and my first station was at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida.
So let me ask you, why did you decide on the Army Air Corps?
Glamour, as I understood it.
Yeah. Had you ever been on an aircraft up to that point, or?
No. The closest of any military connection, as a matter of fact, was at high school in ROTC, and wearing 9.6 something other pounds of a rifle.
Oh yeah.
Springfield.
Uh-huh.
But it was a glamorous thing for me to do, along with, as I say again, some of my high school friends who had dropped out of school to go.
Right.
And one of them, a very later, very successful man, businessman, a multiplied millionaire, a high school dropout.
Yeah.
But he was fellowship, happy,
Right.
clean, polite, and went to work for one of the Chevrolet dealers in Memphis.
Let me ask you about that when you joined and you got out of boot camp. And where did you go to boot camp?
No such a thing
No,
as a boot camp.
No?
It was just go on and go to work
Yeah.
as a clerk in the supply room in a bomb squadron, heavy bombardment, in Tampa, and a very fortunate events with superior officers and senior non-commissioned officers. I went to pilot training as an enlisted man, and if successful would have been made a staff sergeant instead of a corporal.
What did you train on when you were in pilot school?
Some little PT, but I washed out.
Oh, he did.
And as was the custom, you were returned to your unit. Well, when I did that, in the short period of time, my unit had moved from Tampa to Shreveport, Louisiana, and had engaged in a development of another bomb group, and was in the process of developing yet another one when I rejoined.
And is that the 44th bomb group?
44th Bomb Group.
44th.
And that's the group that I was in and I ultimately returned to. And I returned to a next door, if you will, office-wise,
yeah,
of the commanding officer, and I was a first sergeant.
Ah,
At 19 years of age,
nice.
I had already reached the top.
very good. Well, things move fast then.
Oh, well, those are fast days.
Yeah. So let me ask you about the 44th Bomb Group, because eventually they went to Shipdham, England, right?
Correct.
Started up that
Yes,
airfield.
that's right.
And
And-
tell me about that. So how did you get over to England?
Well, most interesting things were happening. There were men who were dedicated,
Mm-hmm.
and there were no drugs to my knowledge. And I should know that as the ranking enlisted person in our squadron.
Right.
And I have had experiences along that line, if you will. We were a group of young men, even though young was 30.
Yes. Right.
And here I am, just barely now 20.
Yeah.
But let me tell you the caliber of men of this unit. Unique. Unique.
In what ways were they unique?
Thank you for the question.
Well, you're welcome.
My commanding officer, who really was a commanding officer, was unique in the aviation world, for when he and his brother in 1945, 35,
Uh-huh.
thank you, set the world's endurance record for staying aloft.
No kidding. What was his
20
name? Do you recall?
Oh yes, I love him. Algene E. Key, Key, Key Field, Meridian, Mississippi. Former squadron mayor of Meridian.
Oh, really? Fascinating.
Al Key and his brother Fred, in 1925, I'm having trouble, aren't I? 35, flew 25 days and some hours and minutes, non-stop.
That's impressive for technology of the mid-30s, too.
Oh,
I don't know how you do that.
Well, just plain talent and perseverance
Yeah, very good.
and honor.
Right.
Oh,
Now, was he your commanding officer when you got to England too? Did he stay
yes,
with the
he
40
was the commanding officer.
Yeah.
And here is the man. Oh, I love him. And my wife and I have visited his grave in
Yeah.
Meridian, and many years ago.
Well, let me ask you, Tommy. Did he help? Was he instrumental in eventually getting you to officers candidate school?
Thanks for the question.
You're quite welcome.
Oh, did he? He promoted me to two different panels. One was a selection to West Point, and one was to the Officer Candidate School 90-day wonders
Yeah.
in Miami, Florida.
And that would have been 1943, I think.
1942.
Two was when I guess the process
Yes.
started.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And
Can I ask you a question real quick? So,
Sure.
what were you doing as a job or as a function in between in the 41, 42 before you went to officer candidate school? Because you were in England at that point. So what was your day-to-day responsibility?
I was the first sergeant.
And what does that mean to be the first
That
sergeant?
means the administrative corps
Uh-huh.
for the commanding officer to work with the enlisted men and associate with the officers. We would make it an executive nowadays.
Right.
As a matter of fact, later on, the authorities assigned an officer to be the adjutant,
Oh, I see.
and then the executive officer. Things became kind of complicated.
Can I ask you a little bit more question about that
Yes.
time? Because that's very. By the way, I forgot to tell you, I'm ex-military. I was in the Navy for
Good
a
on
number
you.
of years. So
Good
I
on
kind of know a little bit what you're talking about.
Sure you do.
But in those times when you were there and you guys were setting up the airfield, I believe, and,
Yes.
and the war was going on. And
Yes.
You're not too far off from the coast.
No.
So I'd like to understand what was it like in those days? I mean, did you have air raids a lot?
Oh
or-
yes, not a lot where we were,
Right.
but we did have air raids, and
Can you tell me how did that feel when you heard the air raid siren? I mean, what were your reactions and what were your feelings about all that? I mean, how's
to run for cover.
run for cover? Yeah, I would say.
And not unlike I would recommend here in Collierville. If I have any advice for the civilian corps of the United States, is to pay attention. And I give you a very fundamental human example. The English, when they had a bombing raid
Right.
and destroyed some property, the chances are that they would take the rumble and clean it up and leave that area open for rain collection. Now this is extremely serious to me. They would leave that opening for water collection for sanitation.
Oh, right.
Sanitation.
Well-
Here in Collierville, as an example, in the neighborhood that I belong to and happy with, proud of, we have a swimming pool that's part of the neighborhood.
Right.
And the various neighbors of 110 have pools,
Right.
have swimming pools. And the word has been sent out to expect neighbors coming by with buckets for water for their toilet
Right. Right.
in,
So-
in the event that we have a loss of water.
Well, you got that reserve. That's good.
And
Well,
so,
let me ask you about, because I read when you were setting up the airfield that the early days, I think you said in your bio at one point, I mean, the mud and the muck was hard to overcome. I mean, that was a challenge in those days. What did you mean by that when you wrote
well, a bomb would come in,
that? Uh-huh.
explode, make a physical damage of nothing more than land.
Yeah.
Right out here in the parking lot, you would say, a bomb would blow and it would press out
Yeah.
dirt,
Mm-hmm.
and that could be a reserve for rainwater.
Right. So I imagine the airfield was a key target for the Nazis.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So and it took damage occasionally.
On occasion.
Yeah. Were there casualties experienced in those bombing
Were there
raids?
what, please?
Were there deaths, casualties, injuries from
Well,
your staff?
well, of course. They're here, there, and so forth.
Right.
Some serious, some not so life-threatening.
What was
but-
it? What was it? What was it like to have to live day to day under the threat of bombs coming down and air raids?
It's a matter of learning.
Yeah. Tell me what you mean by that. Learning about what?
Learning to hear the sirens
Mhm.
and to control yourself emotionally, to mentally.
Did were some of the men better or worse at that?
Well, yeah, well, is A plus B plus C.
It's human nature,
Yeah,
right?
It's human nature.
Right.
And
Well, as a person in a leadership position, then, did you have an occasion to try to help people overcome and react better in those situations?
I never had the cause to.
Mm-hmm.
We were most fortunate in our air base to not be targeted more than maybe 3 or 4 times during the whole war.
Oh, really?
But we were once again conscious of that. And one of the examples later on in the war, and I would say late 43,
Mm-hmm.
there were little bunks of concrete and brick that would make a circle, not very high, about 3 feet high,
Uh-huh.
a figure, and we could go and crawl in behind that circle as a protection against strafing. Strafing was a large factor in German combat, as I understand it,
Right. Right.
on such facilities,
Right.
because we were spread out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you were in London, totally another story.
Right. That was
That-
carpet bombing there.
That was, yes,
Mm-hmm.
and I love the British.
I was going to ask you about your experience with the British.
I admire the British. In fact, next door to our home is a British war bride.
Here
not,
in
not
Collierville?
not a war bride per se,
Uh-huh.
but later on.
Right.
And she's in her 60s. Just a wonderful person, married to a wonderful Air Force,
Uh-huh.
GI, and my wife and I, in 1990, made a 2-week trip
Really?
to the England.
Tell me about that. How did that feel to go back?
Oh,
Now you're giving me chills. I mean, this sounds like it was something that was.
I just loved it.
Yeah.
My wife and I, of course, and I were married at one of my trips over to England. I made 2 trips.
Right.
Went home, commissioned, went to gunnery school to go get them,
Yeah.
and
And then 1944, you went back.
in 1944.
I think so.
Was
Well,
that about 44?
what do I know? You were there. I wasn't.
Whenever.
Yeah.
And I flew a few combat missions as a gunner.
Can I ask you about that for a second?
Oh, yes.
And that was on the B-24.
B-24, love it.
Yeah, it was a great
A
plane.
great airplane.
Great plane. And so what struck me was, so you were an officer at that point.
I was a second lieutenant.
Very good. That's nice.
Yeah.
And was it common for officers to be gunners? I thought that was an enlisted.
No. Yes and no.
Uh-huh.
In the new B-29,
Yeah.
that's how I was targeting myself, to go to be a B-29 combat control officer.
Ah, right.
I don't think that ever went through,
Uh-huh.
but that's how I had my venue
Right.
into that world,
Mm-hmm.
because I was wanting to go to combat. I was a pistol,
Right. I can kind of tell that. That's great.
and
So you were a gunner. So what position were you? The waist gunner, tail gunner,
everything but the tail. I
You
mean
didn't
the
the ball turret?
ball gun. And of course, I had no desire for that position.
I hear that's a bad position. So what was your favorite? What was the one that you preferred?
Any of them.
Any of them?
I only had 9
Mm-hmm.
in World War II.
9 missions.
Non-combat mission. Then the Korean, my whole career changed, and I flew 2 combat tours out of Japan.
And what aircraft were you on at that point?
In Korea,
Yes, sir.
a reconnaissance aircraft, RB-50G, electronic warfare reconnaissance,
Mm-hmm.
and
That was a propeller-driven plane.
oh yes,
Right.
and a wonderful airplane.
And how many engines did that have?
4,
4. Okay.
and this airplane was equipped to fly 20 hours and whatever,
Right.
and of course plus air refueling.
Was it pressurized?
Well, yeah.
But the B-24 wasn't pressurized,
no,
was it?
No, the B-50 we were with oxygen mask, and 16 men, and
And the,
it was a tough one.
in what way, sir?
You never knew when the Russian or the Chinese or the Korean would come out and zap you. And the Russians did, the low bread
Were they
blankety blanks.
Were they in MiGs? Or
They were in whatever.
right.
They came out 3 days after the armistice.
3
the
days
Korean
after?
armistice, and shot down one of our reconnaissance aircraft around 6 o'clock in the morning out in the Sea of Japan. And,
Did we
and
lose all
lost
the men?
everyone except the co-pilot.
Did you have friends on that plane, or?
Yes, I sure did. And not close,
Right, right.
but yes. Yeah.
That must have made
Let
everyone
me
furious.
stop you there on that friends.
Sure.
Everybody's a friend.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
You're on your crew, yours, but you're friends.
Because you're all in it together?
Yes.
Right.
Let me explain.
Please.
I buried one man in Arlington Cemetery who was killed in an accident in Omaha, Nebraska on his way home.
Way home from the service?
Home from, pardon me, Japan.
Uh-huh.
He had flown his duty, and he and I were good friends because he and I could socialize.
Right.
And he was black. The last time I saw him alive, he didn't know whether he was white or black, nor I.
Well, that was amazing because that would have been in the early 50s, perhaps, or
Maybe
mid
52.
52.
And it was my pleasure and honor. In Puerto Rico is where we were stationed.
Mm-hmm.
To be a part of the honor guard to bury the 5 victims of the wreck, the accident in Omaha, and he was one of them.
Was it an automobile accident or a flying
Airplane
accident?
accident.
Accident.
It was a crash landing
Oh.
and turned over
Mm.
on its back and killed.
Well, I'm sorry for your loss. That I can tell that was.
Yes. Well, all 5 of them were friends. It's like yours.
Right.
We have friends, and then we have real friends.
Of course.
And then maybe we have even more friends.
Right.
And this is this. And the last time I saw him, he was so drunk, he didn't know whether I was white or black. And I likewise.
You were drunk too?
A little drunker than all get out.
I think I had a drink or two when I was in the service.
You bet you, buddy. But the greatest honor, I believe, and there could be some argument here,
Yeah.
but one of the greatest honors was to take the United States flag and to present it to his widow on behalf of a grateful nation.
Oh, you're giving me chills.
Arlington Cemetery.
Right. Yeah.
All the glamour.
We've had an occasion to take the family, the kids, to Arlington, and it's something
Oh.
to see.
It's,
It tugs at you.
it
Yeah.
is. But there
Can I ask you a
there's
question?
where race and
Right.
and gender. Hey, I married, what's my second marriage. I married a hero.
How so?
She was a flight nurse during World War II.
Really?
A
Wow.
Holly Springs, Mississippi girl. And she flew combat, if you will, in India, up in the northern part of India, World War II,
Yeah.
to bring out the wounded
Wow.
in air evac, to bring them over to a more classified hospital
Yeah.
in Cairo, or maybe over in Morocco, as it might have been,
Right.
things change in war.
Sure.
And she was a honorable Mississippi girl.
Yeah.
Um,
And she's no longer with us?
she's passed away. And here is you talk about honor.
Right.
Oh God. Here she had been flying flight nurse.
Right.
And men can be aggressive in their sexual behavior
Yeah.
to the point that women who don't care for that
Right. Right.
attitude can have an extremely difficult time. She had that,
Right. When she was in the service?
yes. And up comes her annual physical for flight,
Right.
and she fails it because of high blood pressure.
Uh-huh.
But she was so tired of this massaging
Oh,
attitudes
right.
that she didn't argue with the fact of high blood pressure.
Right.
Didn't contest it at all. She said, as she told me, she said, well, fine, where am I going to be assigned?
Yeah.
And she said, I want to go to Biloxi, Mississippi, Keesler Air Force Base. She's a Mississippi girl,
Right.
logical.
Perfectly logical.
She's intelligent.
Uh-huh.
She's very attractive.
How long were you married?
40 some odd years.
Wow. Wow.
We had 2 daughters.
Oh,
Have
congratulations.
2 daughters.
Awesome.
But here is, once again, the human drama, whether it's military or what. But in this case, it's the military and more contained,
Right.
if you will. She took the grounding, took the going to be a nurse
Right.
on a ward where I was a patient,
Why were you a patient?
a hernia.
Oh.
And lo and behold,
And what year would that have been?
47,
Okay, so it's out of.
I'm
You've gone back into the military at that point.
back in the military.
Mm-hmm.
I'm back as a GI, not yet recalled to active duty as a big first lieutenant.
Wait a minute, so what? I've lost the sequence. So
That's all right.
in '43, you went to officer candidate school, and then you're first lieutenant, right?
Yes,
In '44, you go back, and the war's over now.
yes, I'm out.
And
I'm
you're
here
out.
in
Yeah, you're in
Collierville,
Collierville.
and I'm down here across the railroad track in the feed mill that Lucius Birch owned. And tell me you don't know about Lucius Birch and live
heard
in
the name.
Collierville.
I've heard the name, sure.
Well, I'll tell you, he was a man.
Yeah.
He had me to go to pilot training in a little country town.
This was
Air
between
station,
when you were out of the service
between-
and
uh-huh.
before you went back.
And I did, and I flew over Collierville at 1,500 or something other feet solo.
Nice.
And if you don't think I wasn't the hottest
I
thing,
bet you were.
oh boy, this is in 46.
Yeah, that's unheard of. There's not.
You know, goodness
Yeah.
gracious. But,
That's interesting.
but.
So why did you decide to go back into the service?
I almost said hesitation, but no, that's far from that. It was heartache.
Yeah.
I'd had a marital
Oh, I see.
disruption, and the Air Force, the military, was a safe haven.
Mm-hmm. So it's something you knew, something you were good at.
Yes, and so I did. And then when I was doing it, I applied directly to the Pentagon for recall to my first lieutenant. Forget all this rubbish going through the channels.
Yeah.
And would you believe it? The Pentagon said yes.
Well, good. Let's go to the top, right?
And so once I'm in, I understand I did a no-no, and so I applied for active duty. And after I'm on active duty, they came through and said, okay.
So you asked for forgiveness, not permission.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, before we go too far, so you're back in, and now I want to kind of bring you back to World War II for a second, because
Please.
I'm always fascinated about where were you on big events, like where were you on D-Day?
on D-Day, I had just launched in a ship to return to England that very day from up in New York.
No kidding, and you were on a troop transport going back to New England?
Oh boy,
What's that
2
like?
weeks.
2 weeks on the troop?
Ach, mein lieber Gott.
Not good, huh?
Oh. And one thing that made it bad was some fun I was having. I knew I was going back to England.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to see my old friend Major Key,
Yeah.
Algene E. Key,
Right.
who, oh God, I loved him.
You sound like a great man.
Oh, he was a
So
magnificent.
you were having fun on the ship?
Sir?
You were having fun on the troop transport?
I
or
had
before?
fun in going toward England because
Oh.
I knew I was going to see my friend
Right, right.
Major, now Lieutenant Colonel,
Uh-huh.
Algene E. Key. And I was going to bring him a gift. And I did.
What'd you bring him?
A bottle of Old Crow.
What did he do when you gave it to him?
Oh, he just had a fit, and I almost dropped the bottle.
He wouldn't have liked that.
Oh, Lord have mercy, no. And of course, once he had secured possession,
Yeah.
he put his arms up
Ah,
around me and hugged me.
Yeah, because you were telling us